Hi, it's Michael here from Custom Bike Fit, and today I want to talk about my top 3 tips, the top 3 things that you should be looking for before you buy your next time trial bike. Okay, so the first thing that I believe you should be looking at are the Aero Bars, and you'll notice with a lot of bikes today, a lot of, if you like, top of the line bikes, they have what's called an integrated front end, and the reason that bikes are built with an integrated front end supposedly is that they're more aerodynamic. We can hide cables, the bars and the stem are all one piece, etc, etc, and those bikes generally carry a premium, so anything between $2,000 and $3,000 additional you'll be paying for one of those bikes with an integrated front end. The problem is this: the bike doesn't cause the majority of the aerodynamic drag. 70 to 80% of the drag is actually caused by the rider, and having a front end that's integrated actually makes it more difficult for the fitter to fit you in an aerodynamic position. So I keep thinking back to Lionel Sanders. I'm a big fan, and his YouTube channel, and he had a fit with Ivan O'Gorman, and they went to the velodrome and they did some aero testing. And the thing that stood out to me was that all the nice marketing videos, Lionel's out on his Canyon Speedmax CF SLX top of the range integrated front end, and in the velodrome I noticed that they were working with the model below, the CF, which has a profile design front end, and the reason they were doing that is because it's really easy to adjust. So I don't think there's any point in spending all that money on an integrated front end. I would advise my clients to come down a step and look for something that's independent, because it's more adjustable and you can change things on the fly very, very quickly. If you want to change the extensions, you want to change the pads, you want to change your stem, all these things can be done, the length of the stem, the angle of the stem, etc, etc. The other thing that I talk to my clients about is, where are you going to be racing? Where are you going to be travelling to? And how mechanically minded are you? So let's say, for example, you are going to travel overseas or even interstate with your bike and you've got an integrated front end. Unless you're extremely mechanically minded, you're not going to take the front end of the bike off. You're going to have to drop that front end into a bike bag, and then you've got to cross yourself and hope that it gets to the other end, to the destination, without being broken. Because if it is broken, if there's any damage to the front end, and you own a Cervelo P5 or you own a Trek Speed Concept or a Canyon top of the range or a Felt top of the range, you have to go back to that manufacturer to source the parts to repair the bike. Okay? Now, if you've got something with an independent front end, so an independent stem, independent base bar, extensions, pads, and this is mainly profile design, and you know everyone out there knows I'm a fan, I can take, number one, I can remove this completely from the bike and I can lay it down in the side of the bike bag, which makes it more secure, less chance of anything breaking. But if anything does break, let's say one of my extensions is snapped, or the base bar gets damaged, or one of my armrests, I can simply go down to the expo. There'll be 2 or 3 people there selling these parts. And if they're not, I'll find a local bike shop and I'll find something in the destination in which I'm racing and I'm out of trouble. Rather than you've arrived somewhere, you're without a bike and maybe you've got to hire one or who knows what. So that's my first tip. Number 1, go with an independent, what I call an independent front end. So an independent stem, base bar, extensions, etc. It's far more adjustable, number 1. It's far easier to travel with, number 2. It's far less expensive, number 3. And those extra dollars that you've saved, you can either put them in your pocket or you can spend them on things like aero helmets, race wheels, race suits, that sort of stuff. Okay, my second tip is around crank length. And I'm just going to go out and say this, go out on a limb and say, there really is no penalty for going with a shorter crank. So the typical crank lengths that I see are 175mm, 172.5, 170 and 165. And there's been a trend in triathlon over the last few years to go down to a shorter crank. And I'll tell you the reasons why. Let's say we have a bike with 175mm cranks and we've set the saddle, we've done a professional fit, And now we reduce the crank length down to 165. Well, what happens? The saddle needs to go up 10 millimetres. What's the impact there? Well, we have an impact on the aerodynamics, and we also have an impact on the hip angle. So the back angle should come down a touch, and the hip angle should open up a touch. Now that means that you're going to be moving faster, you're going to be able to generate more power. The hip angle being further open, you should be able to generate more power. And what I also see when the hip angle is further open is that you'll be able to run better off the bike. Now, typically when you go in and purchase a bike from a bike shop or online, they come as a standard. A medium frame generally, or a 54 for example, will come with a 172.5 crank. And as you go down in size, the crank usually gets smaller, and as you go up in size, the crank usually gets longer. That's not always the case. For example, if you order a medium Canyon Speedmax from Canyon, you will get 175mm cranks, which in my opinion is completely ludicrous, and I don't think they'll change them. You have to order the bike with that length crank, and that kind of steers me away from Canyon a little bit. But there's nothing to stop you from going into the bike shop and saying, okay, this is the frame I want, this is the size, but I don't want the 172.5 cranks that come as standard. I want the 165. What will you do for me? And you'll generally find that you'll pay a small premium. But the last thing you want to do is go back in 6 months later and then have the cranks changed over. So look at crank length, it's really important. If you're worried about leverage, you can always put a larger front chainring on. But if you're buying online, companies like Quintana Roo, who have been developing a relationship with, you can actually specify the crank length, and they'll build your bike with anything. So just about all of the bikes, or all of the bikes there, they're built to order. So you order frame size, you order the components. I want Di2, I want mechanical. These are the size of the chain rings I want. This is the size of the cranks. They're very, very flexible. So crank length, really important. Have a good, long, hard think about crank length. Talk to a professional fitter before you buy your next triathlon bike. Okay, my third tip, and this really speaks to, I think most people that buy time trial bikes, triathlon time trial bikes, they're generally doing the longer events. They're doing 70.3 and Ironman, and these are certainly representative of my customers. I mean, I would say the majority of the people that come in for a triathlon fit are doing that longer course racing. And one of the conversations I'll have with people that are doing triathlon is, okay, if you're doing 70.3 or you're doing Ironman, where are we going to carry everything? Okay, so you want to be able to carry, I believe, in a half Ironman, depending on how much you sweat and the conditions you're in, 2 or 3 bottles on the bike. And as you know, I like to have a bottle between the Aero Bars, and then I like to go behind the saddle. And that really poses the questions, well, where am I going to carry my spares? Because now I've filled up my bottle cages, unless we go onto the frame. So putting bottles on the frame isn't very aerodynamic. It creates a lot of drag. And you'll notice today there are a number of bikes on the market that have behind-the-seat storage. This is actually something that's been custom-made. This is aftermarket for a P5. And I will put in a link. So there's a gentleman in the US that's making this behind-the-seat storage for particular bikes. And the benefit of doing this is obviously you don't lose a bottle cage, but everything sits behind the saddle. It's hidden from the wind, and you can get in here a couple of tubes. You can get in your CO2 canisters. You can get in your tyre levers, and then as I said, you're not losing a bottle cage on the frame. So bikes that have the behind-the-seat storage today are the Trek Speed Concept, the BMC Time Machine. Some of the Felt IA series does, and some of them don't. Majority now do, so the Felt IAs. Quintana Roo, so Quintana Roo behind-the-seat storage and top tube storage is standard. Factor, so the Factor Slick has behind-the-seat storage as well. So storage is really important, particularly, again, if you're going long, if you're doing 70.3 or Ironman triathlon, look for bikes that have storage behind the seat and storage on the top tube, preferably. Then you don't have to strap things to the bike, you don't have to forego a bottle cage, etc, etc. So they're my top 3 tips for things to look for before you're buying your next time trial bike. You need to look at the Aero Bars, you really need to look at crank length, and then look at storage systems, behind the seat storage and top tube storage. So thanks again for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Put some comments below by all means, and I'll answer any questions that you have. And to make sure you don't miss the next upcoming video, please subscribe to my channel. And thanks for your time.